crowd size stars. And then for the first probably 6 or 7, or probably first 8 or 9 years, I kept track of the money that I made as well. There you go, right there. Look at that. Look at that picture. That's the basically the first night I ever met Konnan at the Boxa Lucha Awards in Mexico City, December of '93. How crazy is that, Konnan? Have you ever seen that picture before?
No, that is crazy, bro.
So So what I did was, after I decided to put this out as a book, I didn't want it to just be a book of just all of these lists. So I came up with a bunch of top 10 lists. I got a bunch of luminaries, yourself included, Konnan, to give their thoughts on my career, their top 10 lists, favorite matches, etc. And then I went to the dreaded storage unit and went through all of these boxes to find pictures like the one you just saw, pictures no one has ever seen before. Because back in those days, as crazy as it might sound for people now, there was no phone. So if you were going on the road, I would take a camera and actually take pictures, and then you would get photo prints. So I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pictures from these days in Mexico, Japan, Germany, early Canada that no one had ever seen before. So I kind of put it all together. It's almost like a history book, because it's from a 30-year time span and how much the business has changed since 1990 till now. And the first 6 years or so, with all of these notes from all the countries, I said, you won't find them online, because you can find a lot of this stuff from the last 15, 20 years on cagematch.com. All those match listings are there. All of this stuff from Mexico and all these other places, you will never find anywhere else. So it almost is like a history book of this 30-year span of what wrestling was and what it is now.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I found so, for my own entertainment was the Mexico section, was looking at, the list of the matches. Also, I mean, the history of the payoff is so intriguing, right? And it looks like, throughout Mexico, it really kind of varied a lot city by city. It wasn't necessarily who you were in the ring with that night, and it wasn't necessarily so much necessarily where it was on the card, but it seemed like there was a real big variance from the payoffs in the different cities, which I thought was really fascinating.
Well, how this worked, and Konnan can back me up on this, is I got paid weekly by Paco Alonso for CMLL, and that would be for 4 matches a week. So if I was making, let's say, I don't know, $1,000, those matches would be $250 no matter what. Then you would get sent to the outposts, if on a Tuesday night in Cuernavaca or something, and then the promoter would basically pay you through the office. And I'm sure the office made as much as I did off of it, but then you would get, okay, here's $150. Here's $300. Sometimes if you were going really far, they'd pay you $500 because they were looking for names.
Did you ever work in Memphis?
Never worked in Memphis, but we're talking Mexico right now. But if you
no, let's say similar.
So if I had that $1,000 from Paco and then worked another 3-4 matches and added another 1,000, there's a $2,000 week right there. And at 23 years old with no expenses, that was good money. Still is good money, but it was really good money.
Let me ask you a question. Out of all the promotions that you've been to, what was like the worst territory?
It's hard to say. Like Mexico was great in the big leagues, like working all the shows for Paco. But then you'd go to Aragon, the home of Phoenix,
Arena Aragon,
and it would be just this little ghetto area of Mexico City, and it'd be really scary because, once again, I'm not traveling with anybody else. I'm by myself. You would take the bus. If Aragon's in Mexico City, right, Carlos, or is it outside?
Right outside of Mexico City.
So
the worst part was toilets.
Right,
none of them worked. Everybody was in a broken toilet. The guy was taking a shower right in front of you out of a hose.
Doors open, guys in the toilet, putting together matches, and then they'd wipe their ass and put the toilet paper beside the toilet.
Yeah,
not even in it. So there'd be this paper here, and guys were dude, I don't have to go over my high spot right now. I'm fine. I'll be done in 5 minutes.
Side of the ring, Mexican wrestling.
It really is, right. So if you're looking for just the stuff that I'm thankful that we lived through it. Mexico is a lot of that, because it's still Mexico. It's the Wild West in a lot of ways. Yeah. So that one was kind of one of those ones where it was a really, really.
Work for scary. Stampede.
I never worked Stampede.
That was a hard territory, bro.
Well, and I always wanted to, but they closed down 6 months before I started. So I had all the remnants of Stampede, working in bowling alleys and those sort of things. But going to other countries is always a little bit of a trip. Like Hamburg was weird, but it was the same city every week, every night. So at least you'd have your little routine. But you were basically living in flop houses, and we didn't know any better because you're 22 years old working in Germany. How cool is this? Right. Meanwhile, I'm staying in a hotel that's so that if you want to bring a girl over, you have to put her over your shoulder and walk up the stairs because there's an electric eye that beeps. And if you have a visitor in your room, you have to pay an extra 40 Deutschmarks. And I couldn't afford that. So I would literally put the chick over my shoulder and tell her to be quiet and just walk up the steps in one fell swoop. So, and then you'd piss in the sink because you have a sink there, but you don't have a bathroom for your own. So you got to make do. But all those things are part of kind of the history of paying your dues. Yeah. And once again, that's why I'm so glad that I have so much of it encapsulated in this book because, we can remember it, but I can actually go back and tell you dates and moments. And then, like you just said, Disco, you think of Salina, Kansas, and all these other memories come back. So
here's the weirdest thing I've noticed since doing these podcasts, but you've got a history of doing them, right? It's like people say they send in emails. And they go, hey, can you tell us some stories about so-and-so? And I off the top of your head, you can't think of any stories. But when you get it hey, you remember the time when this happened? And you kind of zoom in and say, geez, I do remember a lot of stuff. I do remember. But it's just ask me well, hey, you got any good Jericho stories? It's you're in a brave fuck. It's oh, do you have the story about Jericho throwing the pizza at the guys in Peoria, Illinois? It's oh yeah, I got that story. The cops. But it's you remember when you're given a specific thing to remember, and it triggers your memory sometimes.
That's what I'm saying. This spurs your memory. So Konnan, give me a number between, I don't know, 100 and 250. Just pick a number between 100 and 250.
Yeah, 200.
Okay, so this is the Mexico year. So I just want to show you some a random match that I might have had. So match number 200 was Mexico City, August 28th, 1993, a 6-man with Vampiro and Perroth Jr. versus Gladiador, Dr. Wagner, and Grand Marcus Jr. 3 stars.
Wait, how many of those guys that you worked against ended up being big main eventers for a long time?
Well, the thing was, a lot of them were main event. Those guys were called El Ola Lilo, right?
No, La Ola Blanca.
Ola Blanca.
What is that, the white what?
White wave.
The white wave.
The white wave.
So they all dressed in white, and this was kind of the early days of Dr. Wagner Jr. before he became the heavyweight champion. And their trio they were the white wave, and they all wore white. And Wagner was always great, and Gladiator was okay, and Marcus was just he was a great guy, super nice, but just a big kind of fat guy and gold tooth. And
but he wasn't as good as the original Gran Marcos. He was Gran Marcos Jr. Bro, gotcha. I wrestled the original Gran Marcos, and he was a humongous guy, a tremendous. But back then when you first broke into the business, when we broke into, every guy was kind of a. Yeah. They were just beating you up, testing you, stretching you. Let's see what you got. You know what I'm saying? And Marcus was a big old boy that he could take it to you. And I remember the first time I wrestled him, bro, he slapped me as hard as he could in my back. And Rey Mysterio Sr. goes, bro, if you don't give it back to him, you're going to be a little bitch this whole tour. And I hit him as hard as I could. He turned around, hit me back. I hit him, and I got respect. You know what I'm saying?
See, but you had to do that. There were certain guys, for me, like Dandy, was just great. He always took care of me, showed me around. Atlantis was always nice, but then as soon as there was a crowd of other Mexican guys, he would turn on me and start, insulting me. A guy like Bestia Salvaje, who was a great worker, he wouldn't give you nothing unless you took it at first. Satanico was all these types of guys. Emilio Charles Jr., he was kind of in the middle, but once you earned his respect, he was amazing. Yeah. But you had to earn the respect of these guys. And a lot of reason why I got it was because Negro Casas really took a liking to me because we always were having good matches. He understood that I had passion for this. I wasn't just some blonde guy from Canada coming in and trying to make easy money. And once Negro gave me the stamp of approval, then the other guys slowly followed. But it was hard. Satanico, Pirata Morgan, those guys. Right. Massacre. Massacre was the worst.
How often did you have to give it back in there?
In the early days, working for Elizondo in Monterrey, which was kind of the offshoot, that would be kind of like the Ring of Honor. if EMLL was AEW, for example. So those guys were really bad. There was a guy
because that's more the indies. So they're even that's even
right.
worse.
Oh, so the guys that trying to take advantage,
very little professionalism there. Yeah.
Konnan, what does sanguinario mean? Bloody?
Bloody, yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy called Sanguinario.
Bro, you're not gonna believe this. Have you seen this kid called what's his name? Gino Medina? What's his name, Kevin?
Yeah,
that's right. Gino.
Have you seen Gino Medina?
No.
Good-looking Mexican kid. I think he's an MLW right now. That's Sanguinario's son.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. His name was Luis, was his name.
Yeah.
But you had to earn your stripes. That happened a lot in Japan in the early days too. When I started with FMW, it happened in WWE. I mean, Bob Holly would beat the shit out of you, JBL, all those guys until you gain their respect. So by the time you got to CMLL Arena Mexico, it wasn't as bad because those guys were the big name guys.
Yeah.
So and Paco always booked me in the top half of the card, so I didn't have to deal with it too much. But then when you went to the outposts and you work with the Massacres and those type of guys, Piroth was hard for a while too until you finally got his respect because those guys were
they went through the same
right.
You know?
And I had no problem with that. I came from Calgary; it wasn't a big deal. Right. But you had to earn your stripes with those guys.
But just so the new wrestlers that they've heard about it, or maybe they're not sure how bad it was really bad. And you can read Eddie Guerrero's book, and he'll go into detail.
Well, Eddie was like that with me the first couple of times I met him. He was a total so it was just part of it. But that's what I mean, like going through this and kind of reading some of those names, like I haven't thought of Grand Mark. How about this one? I just opened this. November 5th, 1993, Atlantis Ultimo Dragon versus Black Magic, Emilio Charles Jr., and Mocho Cota.
Remember? He was missing a finger.
I think was that because of Mafia or why? I don't know why he was missing.
Not sure, but he was in jail for a very long time.
He would do this because he was missing both these fingers.
Yeah.
So his sign was like Ronnie James Dio, except for he didn't have to do this.
Jimmy
he just
Snuka.
didn't. He didn't. But he didn't. Right. But
he was missing two fingers.
He didn't have these fingers in the middle. He had no choice but to do the Jimmy Snuka, Ronnie James Dio. And so you're always wondering, like, what's up with this guy, right?